With Wolfman, the fun part was the prosthetic makeup, leaning into creature design. There was none of that in Invisible Man. You know, with this one, I've always loved really great prosthetic makeup. I grew up watching films like The Thing and The Fly, American Werewolf in London, Evil Dead, Reanimator, like all the great prosthetic makeup artists. That's a big part of my life. I love the name. Spoiler time.
I'm very happy to talk to you because you were my very first video interview 10 years ago when Insidious 3 came out.
Oh, wow. Okay, awesome. Yeah, right. I remember that junket day. I remember the day. That's awesome. Cool. Congrats on how far you've come.
I want to talk to you about classic monster movies and their historical context because I was thinking that what scares audiences in 1930s, 1940s, and so on isn't going to work in 2025. After directing and writing The Invisible Man and Wolfman, what did you learn about what scares people nowadays?
Well, it's a difficult question because it's always changing and evolving, like you said, not even across decades, but across months and years. Right. You know, what scares someone in January might not be the same in December because maybe they're burnt out on that. You know, so I find it very difficult to judge. I have to use myself as a barometer for like, what is the thing that scares me? And the scariest thing about Wolfman to me was the idea of not being able to communicate with your family anymore. And that's something that could happen to us if we lost the ability to speak, if we were suffering from some type of illness. So it's very easy to wrap a horror movie around that concept. In terms of what I've learned, I guess I'll be learning it once the film comes out. You know, I hope that the film connects. But even the most seasoned filmmaker will say that any film you make, you really don't know how it's going to land. It's always this guessing game. The famous William Goldman saying, nobody knows anything, applies. Like, nobody really knows anything about what's going to connect with people. You're just gambling, rolling the dice.
Would you say that that scares you or not?
Yeah, I mean, well, certainly as a creative, it is scary to leap into a movie. It's scary to put it out there. The fun is in the making and the creating. The scary part is when you unleash it to the world and then the world just has at it. Because nowadays we don't just have critics, right? We have self-appointed critics online. You know, everybody's a critic, everybody with a social media account. So you're hearing a lot more voices and you're hearing a lot more opinions about what you're doing. You can either block it all out or you can let it in. I'm not sure how healthy it is to let it in, but it is scary. It is scary because when you write and direct something, you're kind of exposing yourself, so to speak. You're putting your baby out there to be judged, but it's part of the bargain. I mean, if I can't deal with it, then I better choose another line of work.
Well, I actually think people are scared of the same thing, but I think it's harder to shock people now. If there's a difference, kind of. And yeah. I think people get scared when things are familiar. Like, that's why whenever they put dolls in horror films, because you see there's dolls in the back of your shelf. And then all of a sudden they come to life. Exactly. Like, they're scary. If they turn on you, something familiar, it's scary. This is scary. This is my husband. He's familiar. He's turning on us. Like, so I think that doesn't really change, but I think it's like how can you shock with this day and age of internet and social media and, you know, every 5 minutes there's something, like, it's much harder to shock people now in a way, or grab people's attention, I think. So more than scaring people.
Like Nosferatu or like Wolfman, most of the marketing has kept the monster hidden. So the audience has to see the movie in order to see the monster. I want to ask you about your first reaction. I don't know if it was shocking or awkward to see him becoming a Wolfman.
Well, it was funny because Chris was in prosthetics for like 6 hours a day, which was so crazy. And they did such a great job with the makeup on that. After 3 days, I got used to it, to be honest. I don't want to say like I was not used to it after a while, but the first day, I could not stop looking at him. I was just like so shocked. I was like, whoa.
I love The Invisible Man that was released 5 years ago now.
Yeah.
And I remember how that monster doesn't need to hide in the dark, right? The Invisible Man, right. You can have light and it doesn't matter because you cannot see him. So that's the scary thing. And in Wolfman, you have your monster that's going to hide in the dark. So I wanted to ask you about those contrasts. What do you like and didn't like about having to shoot in those kind of ways?
Yeah, there was something very fun on Invisible Man about weaponizing empty space. And I loved that. The power of suggestion was strong with the Invisible Man. With Wolfman, the fun part was the prosthetic makeup, leaning into creature design. There was none of that in Invisible Man. You know, with this one, I've always loved really great prosthetic makeup. I grew up watching films like The Thing and The Fly, American Werewolf in London, Evil Dead, Reanimator, like all the great prosthetic makeup artists. That's a big part of my life. And so I feel like this is a movie I had to make. Eventually, I was going to get this out of my system, sooner or later. So I'm glad I got to do it with Wolfman because he's such an iconic makeup character. When people think of Wolfman, they think of the makeup. I didn't find it so much frustrating. I guess the thing is that, yeah, you are robbed of the power of suggestion because he's right there.
I was reading some interviews and you mentioned one thing that I love, that you don't like to say the word characters. You don't refer to your characters as characters. You see them as people because they are people. And I love that. I truly love that. Like Ruth or like Anna Delvey, sometimes, or I don't know if it's most of the times, that you miss your characters after you portray them. Is there something that you miss about Charlotte after portraying her in Wolfman?
Yeah, I think that there's always something that I miss in a way. But, you know, there's some characters that you can, there's some people that you connect with more than others. And that's why I look at it like people. But I also just look at these people like, you know, it's like I look at life, it's like a book. And I think every person's life, there's always a chapter. And there's always a chapter of that production. And within that chapter, there is that person, the main protagonist in the chapter, which would be the characters, I guess.
After watching Van Helsing, that was my favorite werewolf from the past. And I like this approach that you were very conscious to not repeat what's done before.
Yeah,
So
no,
that's very brave.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I appreciate that.